Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. Today is July 24th, and we are here with a Mr. Cyrille Pastour from Swaap, who is here to talk about the recent launch. And Swaap is an innovative AMM that does a couple of new things to help deal with the issues of toxic flow and impermanent loss. So, Cyrille, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for receiving me today, Sam. Very excited to be here. And hi, everyone.
So maybe you could give us a quick overview of what's happening at Swaap and what sets Swaap apart from other AMMs?
Sure. So essentially, Swaap is an AMM that's completely engineered for LPs. So one of the issues that we have identified with automated market makers today is that, unfortunately, when you're a liquidity provider, you're often, numerous studies have shown that your performances are very likely to be in the red zone. So there was a study, for instance, made by a Twitter account named Scimitar Capital, which showed that on just one pool on Uniswap V3, LPs had lost more than 100 million up to date. And this has kind of been confirmed by the studies that we did at Swaap as well. So what we see is that essentially on non-correlated asset pairs, so pairs such as ETH/USDC, passive liquidity providers are essentially enjoying more of a casino product than an investment product, in the sense that their performances are negative with very high risk. And so what we do at Swaap is we want to provide the LPs with the best market making strategies possible. So in order to do that, we essentially do two things differently than traditional AMMs. We correct, at the source, the things that make LPs lose value in traditional AMMs. So essentially, if you think AMMs as kind of buckets filled with water, you kind of have two holes which leak value for LPs. The first one is the math. So essentially, AMMs use the constant proc formula in order to price the assets that they're allowing people to trade with. So X time Y equals K. And this formula is very good to bootstrap liquidity on a new asset, but it's not good to optimize the risk-adjusted returns of LPs. And what we do differently at Swaap is that we use models that are widely used in traditional finance, so very advanced market making models. And we spent the last 18 months working with researchers in market making, coming from TradFi, to adapt those models to the specificities of DeFi. And then the second thing which sets us apart is information. So this is the second thing that drives value leak from traditional AMMs for LPs. So essentially, AMMs are completely blind to the outside world. They don't integrate any kind of external information in their design. And there is a reason why insider trading is forbidden in TradFi. It's because, and I mean, it's forbidden in finance in general. It's because when you're playing against someone who is more informed than you in trading, you're always going to lose. And this is true with private information, but this is also true with public information. And by not using public information, AMMs are arbitraged very often, and it creates essentially a leak of value. And what we do at Swaap is that we use price feeds in our design. So we look at the price on other venues to understand where the market is, and we adjust our prices thanks to that. And this avoids this very toxic flow that happens on AMMs and which is draining value for LPs.
Mm-hmm. So what are the risks of adding in a oracle to provide pricing and market data to these AMMs?
So, I mean, I guess you're essentially adding two main risks, I would say. So the first risk is the risk of oracle manipulation. So that means someone manipulating the price of, for instance, let's say ETH on Binance, for instance, because this is where essentially most of the price discovery happens. And the second risk is Oracle provider failure, right? So the first risk is actually very unlikely on centralized exchanges. Why is, I mean, especially on blue chip assets. On long tail assets, it can be something a bit different, but on blue chip assets, it's very unlikely because it's very risky to manipulate such prices, right? If you were to try to manipulate the price of ETH, you will need to engage tremendous amount of money without any guarantee to that your exploit essentially works. Actually, this is so there is someone named Avi Eisenberg who tried to do that with AVAX, and I mean, what I understand from the situation is that in the end he got more burned than he managed to gain. So that's the first part. And what we do at Swaap in order to avoid that is like first we set some limits in terms of trading. So essentially the pools that we have cannot be too much imbalance. So if there is such manipulation, there is a cap in terms of how much the manipulation can draw.
Oh, wait, can we go back to those two issues? So, like, what were some of the redundancies that you guys were building in? So, okay, so let me just recap this. Normal AMMs are usually blind, right? They're just contracts out there, right? And so, when you put funds into like a Uniswap LP, it just sits there until somebody decides to come and take that liquidity, right? And so it essentially has these like stale order prices. Because they're always being arbitraged back in the direction they need to go, right? And so liquidity can change, or pricing can change quite fast on centralized exchanges, where you can have, thousands or hundreds of thousands of orders within a second, while on chain, it can only happen, once every block, right? And so there's a I guess duration mismatch, if you want to call it that, where the pricing moves quite far and quite fast sometimes away from what the pricing is on chain, and so this is reflected in the flows. And so, I've seen a couple of options to deal with this, right? Obviously, you guys are using oracles. There's also been I've seen other options of like changing the fee structure as well too. So like what are the different trade-offs of trying to solve this this issue? Because like the main problem is that on-chain LPs are not making the returns they should. So how do you get them to that place? And so like what or not how do you get them to that place? Well, like what are some of the different options that can be used to increase LP fees?
Yeah, that's a very wide question, but I think very, very interesting, and that's the heart of what we do. So relative to the oracles, really the idea is really okay. AMMs are trying to do two things at the same time. They're trying to do market making and price discovery. So that's why they're not using Oracle, is that they like price discovery happens on an AMM depending on the demand on the overall pool. What one needs to understand is that price discovery is usually not done by a market maker or by an entity. It's done by the market, and the participants of the market have the access to the price information. If you compare how market makers are operating in TradFi or in CeFi, they're operating on the order book and they can see the market price at any time. So in a sense, it's as if they were using oracles all the time, in a way. So that's the first point, and that's why we believe at Swaap that it's key to integrate oracles or price information if you're a market maker that wants to provide returns to your LPs. Mm-hmm. If you're a project that wants to bootstrap liquidity on its token, that's a different story, of course, because this is not the same objective that you're trying to achieve. But if your goal as an LP is to get returns, then you should use price information. And we actually demonstrated it in a paper that we published a few months ago, that essentially very naive Oracle-based strategy strongly outperform AMM-based strategies for LPs in terms of risk-adjusted returns.
Right. Then let me go back to that again. So the AMM essentially has like all of these off-chain market makers who are just like watching the books on like Binance or any sort of centralized exchange and just waiting for enough price deviation to happen here. So like, how does the price change happen with Swaap, right? Because like, are you adjusting it block by block? Like, how can you match the speed of those off-chain market makers in a system where, you know, like finality only occurs every like 7 seconds or 12 seconds or something like that?
That's a great question. So essentially, at Swap, we opted in Swap V2, we opted for a novel system, which essentially makes them like is, to our view, a great compromise between transparency, being non-custodial, being accessible to anyone, and interoperable, and with performance. Essentially, what we do is that our quotation system, so the equation and the information that we use to provide a price to an asset is done off-chain. Mm-hmm. So we're using off-chain data. So thanks to that, we can match the speed of market makers and their performance in terms of computations, because we're not limited by gas or whatever. Then based on this quotation module, we send signed quotes to, on-chain to our smart contracts when someone requests to do a swap. And this quote is verified thanks to on-chain performance and authenticity checks to ensure that it's not malicious or value extractive for LPs. So there are a few measures. So for instance, we compare the quotes to the value of on-chain oracles to ensure that it doesn't deviate too much from the on-chain oracles. And the idea essentially is to be able to have the best compromise between performance and keeping the model trust minimized for the LPs.
Interesting. And so, like, how do you ensure that the data, again, we're coming back to this Oracle issue, like, how do you guys ensure that the pricing data is not manipulated in some way? Is it just having redundancies of having like 2, 3, 4 Oracle prices that you're pulling from?
So exactly, I think it's about, so first, getting multiple sources of data. So that's what we do on the off-chain part. We use multiple sources of data. Then it's about, so on our end, we have like a kind of multiple layer check, which is actually even safer than just using one Oracle on-chain, is that we're using multiple sources of data off-chain, which are not so the same as the on-chain data. We're using Chainlink as a comparison data on-chain. And so essentially our quotes are generated from some sources of data, and then they're compared against Chainlink. So you have this kind of multiple comparison. And if one of the sources is corrupted, essentially the trades won't happen, which is not a problem for LPs because you're just missing on the trade, right? So it's a missed opportunity, but if you compare to a security issue, it's nothing. So essentially, yeah, that's how we mitigate against like the risk of provider failure, which is one provider being attacked and starting to show rogue quotes, essentially, rogue information.
Okay. And so like what happens in that case? Like what happens if you start to see that rogue information? Is it just the contract gets shut down, or you just like don't take in that pricing information? Like how many rogue pricing data feeds need to occur before there's an issue with the AMM pricing?
So essentially what happens is that so we use this price information. We compute a quote. We use our models and we compute a quote, and then we compare the quote to the Oracle. So if the first source of information is wrong, then probably our quote is going to be wrong, and it's going to be off by the Oracle information. So the tolerance that we set is around 1%. So for instance, if like let's say that I have a source information that tells me that now ETH is worth $100. And then I make a quote about it and say, let's say I quote it to 105. And then if I compare it to Chainlink and Chainlink tells me, okay, it's 1,000, then what happens is that the trade that was supposed to happen is not going to happen. That's like we're going to revert the trade. And so essentially it's a problem if you're a trader, right? But Swaap does not aim to, like, we don't aim to be a place where people actually swap. we're more meant to be a place like to act as a market maker, as a DeFi native market maker. So the best place essentially to operate your liquidity. And we see like ourselves as more a venue of liquidity in which aggregators like Paraswap, 1inch, 0x, Uniswap X now can tap into. Yeah, so that's how it happens essentially. If there's a corrupted source of information, and that happens at the very first trade, right? If the deviation is large enough.
You're muted, Sam.
Do you think this will be enough to set yourself out against the, I guess, plethora of other AMMs that are coming out? I mean, there's a bunch of other people who are trying, you know, like various things about different AMM models. Like, what do you think is going to set like Swaap apart?
I think it's about maximizing the returns for LPs. So what we see, essentially, a thesis that we have at Swaap since the beginning is that it's something that we call the split, essentially. Essentially, we think that the market is splitting between what we call aggregation layers that are designed to like serve traders, and market making layers which are designed to serve LPs. And we think essentially that traders and LPs have opposite interests. In the sense that if you're an LP, your purpose is to maximize the return you earn from swaps. So for instance, if we could, I think we would charge like very high fees for traders, right? Because it would maximize the returns of LPs, but there is competition. So we have to lower our fees so that we can be executed and provide returns to LPs. On the other end, if you're serving traders, you want the price to be zero, but that's not possible because LPs are getting left out. So essentially, in our mind, it's not possible to reconcile both traders and LPs. So we think that there are some actors that will focus on functionalities for traders. And I think Uniswap is essentially showing a move in that direction with the launch of their aggregator Uniswap X. And there are some actors that are going to focus more on how to optimize the liquidity strategy for LPs. And this is Swaap. At Swaap, we have been doing that for the past 2 years. It has always been our focus to work solely on LPs and optimize what we can deliver to LPs. So we've been working for the past 18 months with mathematicians and researchers in market making to optimize the models that we use. Essentially, what we have right now is like some of the most advanced TradFi models, and we've adapted them to the specificity of DeFi. And I think this is, yeah, we are very advanced on this aspect. And so I think this sets us apart from other players which maybe have compromised a bit more on LPs to try to attract traders and LPs at the same time. And I think this is what's going to make a difference in the long run.
Great. DeFi Advisor, do you have any other questions before we hop on to some eyeball scanning? Oh, he's frozen, isn't he? Okay.
It seems like he is.
Yeah, I don't know where he went. Yeah, he's like stuck in the ether somewhere. Well, that's cool. I think that's really interesting. I was taking a look at the page today. It looks I've not seen a system used in like an Oracle in this way yet. So definitely seems like an interesting system. I do worry about it's like the dependency issues, and we talked about them, but if those can be kept at bay, then obviously then it might be able to outcompete the other AMMs. But there's always trade-offs at the end of the day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's delusional though to pitch a kind of oracle-less. You need to get price information if you want to maximize LP return. So either LPs do them themselves, but then they're professional market makers, or it needs to be done at the protocol level, and then you need to implement oracles. I don't think though that oracles are right now they are mostly based on off-chain, pricing. I think that if tomorrow, for instance, we have an on-chain order book, I mean, those oracles can stem from on-chain prices. It doesn't have to be coming from an off-chain source. So it's not necessarily a problem in the end, I would say.
So how do you think this will? So we've seen multiple. Just one last thing. So we've seen multiple RFQ systems come online. So Uniswap announced their Uniswap X last week. which is essentially going to allow off-chain market makers to essentially provide, they'll provide like an RFQ system, and then like best bid or best ask then comes in and is able to get that swap. Like, did you have any thoughts about their system and how they've designed it?
To me, it's a very logic evolution. We kind of predicted it with Swaap. Actually, I was very surprised when they announced Uniswap before. I thought it was going to be an aggregator with an RFQ mechanism like they did for X. And actually, we are using also an RFQ system, which is partially off-chain with on-chain control mechanisms. So in our view, it's very aligned with essentially providing, the security that you can have on-chain and being able to execute on-chain swaps with the performance and the improvements in pricing that you can get by using an off-chain system. So I would say overall, I think it's very logical. And also it's very logical for Uniswap to do that, because I think Uniswap is trying to become an exchange. So essentially, Uniswap is trying to replace Coinbase, to replace Binance. And if they want to do that, they need to have the best pricing execution for traders. So I think it's very logical for them to launch that.
Oh, that's cool.
How are you guys approaching the issue of onboarding capital? Like, are you creating contacts with LPs that you already know to get them to put the liquidity in? Like, how does that process work? Because I think a lot of onboarding capital is the stuff that happens behind the scenes, if you know what I mean.
True. So on our end, essentially, we target mostly people who are already using DeFi. We're not trying to onboard like TradFi Capital or whatever, because we think that we are an improvement to the existing solutions in terms of liquidity provision in DeFi. We essentially see three channels like of acquisition. So first we have like the retail, so people that, regular DeFi users, I would say. So here it's more about like marketing and ensuring that we are able to make them aware about our value proposition. So that's the first thing, right? Then we have another channel which is more around like large players within DeFi. So either whales or institutional funds in DeFi. So here, as you said, it's more a bit behind the scenes and discussing with them and again communicating around the value proposition, but maybe sharing more ways to do more advanced stuff, such as how to best hedge some specific legs of the pools. It's more, I would say, a sales approach. And the last leg that we have is the DAO part. So essentially, Swaap is also very interesting for some specific types of DAOs. So notably stablecoin DAOs and liquid staking derivative DAOs. So essentially, we allow. So today, if you want to do a swap, for instance, let's say between Frax and ETH, you need to go Frax to USDC on Curve and then USDC to ETH on UniV3 most of the time, right? And this means you're going to pay twice the gas and additional fees. And since and the reason why this happens like that is that it's very expensive to have direct like Frax to ETH liquidity, because you need to compensate the LPs for the impermanent loss. So you need to emit lots of tokens, and LPs are not really willing to do that. With Swaap, it's possible to create direct Frax to ETH routes, for instance, because the pools are designed to be natively like profitable in a way. So what I mean by that is like they're engineered for LPs. So the level of incentives that's needed to bootstrap such pools is much lower, and it enables such projects to have direct liquidity routes. So for instance, we passed a proposal recently where a future Frax to ETH pool is going to be incentivized by the Frax DAO. So those are the things that we're also studying as a way to onboard capital.
Nice.
Very nice. Well, that's cool. So let's move on. Over the weekend, we had, actually today, this morning, really, we had some big news. The Worldcoin token, WLD, launched on Binance and Huobi. I don't think this was like a long-awaited token, but it definitely had been making the rounds. This was a company that was founded in part by Sam Altman, who also runs OpenAI as well too. And Worldcoin is trying to solve the issue of proof of humanity, or the unique human problem. And the assumption really is that as AI gets better and better, there will become a point where like deepfakes will get so good that anything digital, it'll be impossible to tell the difference between real and fake content that exists in the digital space. Well, it'll be impossible. Like the way that people speak or the way that people type can all be trained into a AI bot and then, you know, put back onto us. So to deal with this issue, something has to be done, right? And so there's been a bunch of projects that have gone out and tried to solve this. We've seen Proof of Humanity before, where you like upload a video to yourself and then you have to have somebody else vouch for you. Another project called like Bright ID, where you have like, you join a video call and you have like a verification party with other people that you know. Other projects maybe have you do like a CAPTCHA, then create CAPTCHAs, or like other vouching circles as well too. And this has rolled out to mixed results. I don't think a lot of people are using these solutions so far. And then last year, we saw the emergence of Worldcoin, which is using a biometric solution. So they have developed this piece of hardware, which they call an orb. And the way that it works is that a person installs the Worldcoin app on their phone, and then that generates a private and public key, much like a Ethereum wallet. They then go look at the orb, they stare in it for a while, and the orb generates a QR code that contains their public key. So it scans their eyes, the orb scans their eyes, and then uses a algorithm to determine that the person is real and that their iris doesn't really like match anybody else who's previously used the system. And if it passes, then the orb signs a message approving this hash of the user's iris scan. And then that hash gets uploaded to a database, and then that database exists somewhere, right? Could exist on a blockchain or a centralized server, really anywhere. And so the way that you can check that to ensure validity is to then just use like a simple like ZK proof or a ZK snark, where somebody can come up and rescan their eyeball, and it says, hey, this is the person that originally scanned that. So they launched over the weekend. The market cap was about $400 million with a $30 billion FTV. Trading has commenced, and notably, at the same time it launched, Vitalik published a extensive blog post where he delved into some of what he called the 4 risks of this proof of personhood problem, and specifically Worldcoin, right? And those are privacy, accessibility, centralization, and security. And you know, he makes some important points, right? So we'll start with privacy, right? So like he says, like, even though there's some dystopian vibes about staring into an orb and like letting it scan your eyeballs, right? The project Worldcoin seems to have done like the best that they could do at preserving privacy. And this seems like a step up from other like government solutions, which have centralized databases. They issue IDs, they collect all your personal identifying information. The only thing that Worldcoin is collecting is this hash. That's the only thing they have on file. And so that should limit the amount of privacy issues. Of course, it could be leaked, and then an attacker could like try to pair hashes. Like if they had you, and they could like see if you actually like hashed or not. You know, but it seems that the privacy has been minimized here. And he actually gives them a little bit of credit. He says that they actually care about privacy, and they're taking basic steps to provide anonymization where like all these other centralized solutions don't. And privacy has really been like the big question around this. I think most of the people's issues are around privacy, about like, oh, hey, we're going to let this company go and scan eyeballs for billions of people. And they collect all this information, and then they get rights to resell it as well too, in their terms and agreement. So yeah, but
I
it's,
don't get it.
well, look, let me start with the question, right? If we're gonna have perfect deepfakes here in the next 10 years, or you won't be able to determine who is a person like digitally, like what's the solution? There has to be a solution for that, right?
Yeah, I guess all kinds of solutions are maybe gonna pop up, and like something is needed to be done. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying that as a user, especially these days, there's absolutely no way that I'm willing to scan my eyeballs or give them any kind of this kind. I see it as invasive information. You know what? Maybe like honestly, I even prefer doing stuff like emails and whatever, because frankly, I just don't want this kind of data held by some kind of private company, which I know about for like 3 minutes. Like I remember when Worldcoin first announced, maybe it was a year ago or so, and automatically people thought about an airdrop or something, I guess, and they started scanning their eyeballs voluntarily to some kind of new organization. It's weird. Like there's absolutely no way that I'm volunteering this kind of information, and only if I'm kind of going to have to do it in order to use some applications that I have to use, I will personally consider it. But in my opinion,
well, it was being airdropped, right? So everyone that did scan their eyeballs so far got 25 Worldcoins, and I believe right now that's around somewhere between $25 to $75, depending on where the price was today. And you know, those tokens are out there, like you have them if you scanned it. But it brings up another issue, which Vitalik gets into, and that's the issues of like faking this. Like how many people are actually selling their irises online, where they'll scan for you and then send you the private keys for it, so you can take your airdrop from them. And so, like Vitalik actually brings this up. He says it's actually really hard to deal with this issue. The main thing to do would allow people to like re-register an ID later on after the airdrop if they've sold it onwards, and this should fix it. But he also brings up the issue of like coercion as well too. So like what happens if like North Korea gets an orb, or like somebody that is really like on an OFAC list or something and shouldn't be getting tokens? What do you do with them? And you know, I think most of the issue comes back to the hardware, because here is a centralized piece of hardware that's like produced by one company that has to actually be highly guarded at this point, because if you just let these out, people could figure out the hardware behind it and start making fake irises. And that's always the worry. Or they go around and they start like coercing them, like holding the eye, like forcing them in, forcing them to do the eyeball scan. And so I think there are a lot of questions about how you roll this out effectively. There is no real good solution, and even governments have not really had easy times rolling out identity programs, especially at scale.
Yeah, it's not. I think we have a natural way of resisting this kind of stuff. Like at least a big part of the population, I think, just hears about this stuff and I don't know, just hear about it. You want to avoid it because, like, why? You know what? As long as we don't have to, we're not really going to do it now. Of course, some people will, and like you say, even some people are going to sell it to each other because there's a market for pretty much everything.
Yeah, if we could get some of those issues fixed out. I mean, my main issues come back to like, where's all the data stored? Is it open source? And you know, is the hardware like recreatable to where like if everything is open, right? If everything is open and transparent about like where they're storing the data, how they're like you know, protecting like PII, how they're anonymizing everyone. And then eventually, once they get to the point of like decentralizing the hardware and allowing more people to build these things themselves and go around and scan people's eyeballs, that would probably be the nail in the coffin to say like, okay, this thing is okay. You know, it has enough anonymity and privacy in it, and also security to ensure that it's going to work on a broad scale, even though there might be some malicious actors who are abusing this.
Yeah, and like you said that they keep the rights to sell this kind of data as
well. They keep the hash, right? So they keep the picture and the hash. I think is what it is. So that seems like basic, terms of service stuff where you're giving them their eyeball. They have to hold on to something, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say that like nothing about this feels comfortable to me.
Yeah. Well, so in the terms of service, you essentially allow Worldcoin to collect images of your irises, eyes, and face, and then you allow them to store this information and then transfer the data to their teams in the European Union and the United States for the purposes of training the algorithms.
Yeah. But like now, who's to say that that's actually all they're going to do with it? Like for me, it just feels that okay.
Well, it should be in the terms of service. I mean, like hopefully these altruistic people are not like out to put everybody into,
yeah,
pods,
but
right?
Like, hopefully is a big word. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Hopefully.
So this blog post that Vitalik puts out, it's very in depth. Definitely worth a read if you want to go deeper into the subject. He does conclude that this is actually a really interesting problem, and designing something that works is going to be really challenging. But he thinks that the payoffs for it, right, is pretty big, right? And he says that not having this proof of personhood or eyeball scanning or whatever sort of implementation you want to get to, it's going to lead to a world dominated by centralized identity solutions, money, and small closed communities, or some combination of all three. Because like Vitalik's worrying about DAOs, he's essentially saying that like, DAOs at a nation state level pretty much exclude normal people, and you only have large actors who are competing with like billions of dollars to influence votes, and you only have a small amount of people who actually like vote for things. So Vitalik's more focused on like widening the circle here, making DAOs work.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to like broaden the circle is to really it's going to sound maybe a bit corny, but we just need better solutions for real life stuff to really make normal people not afraid of the whole industry and see it as the scam that they're being told that it is, and sometimes they're quite right. So I think honestly it's all about like stuff like account abstraction and whatever is possible, just in order for people to show, because people like they don't like the barriers. Like no one likes a wallet and a seed phrase, and it really makes like every normal person to pretty much say, oh my god, this is like for nerds and geeks and weirdos.
Yeah, but let me give you a relevant example. Over the last week, we've seen huge growth of Unibot, which is a sniper bot that you plug into Telegram, throw some ETH into it, and then on new Uniswap listings, it fires some ETH off. And this is, it's such a like crazy environment, because you have teams of scammers who are creating hundreds of tokens a day, adding liquidity, and then putting it out there. And you kind of just have to guess based on the contract and how the tokens are distributed. It's almost like an art of saying that, oh, this team is definitely not going to rug us, or, this team has not written malicious code into their contracts. With a decentralized identity solution like this, the people could attest to their iris hashes somehow inside those contracts, and you as the speculator could know if there was a team that was behind scams, or somebody who's actually legitimate and has a real identity and hasn't been doing this sort of like rug pulls and other nasty stuff beforehand.
Yeah, but that's only if I know for sure that they are really using their own actual.
Yeah, of course. Well, but that's the thing, right? Because like if you don't have proof of personhood, you get this insane market where like you could just create a bot, right? You could create a bot that comes up with random names, goes out on Twitter, pulls whatever's hot in the searches, and then creates new tokens on that, and then adds it to like Uniswap, adds some liquidity, and then rugs 5 minutes later. And you could just code this bot, and it would just run, and you would never have to do anything. It would just be bot. Now, like, take this type of malicious bot, expand it outwards into thousands of millions of different use cases, especially outside of the crypto realm, right? Like once people have like fully trained voice AIs, like all those scam calls that you get are going to be like way more like prescient and real than they are right now. So, you know, you could get a call from your bank saying like they have all your information, right? They've scoured the internet, they found all your information, they call you up. It sounds like a real bank person. It sounds like you're talking to a real person. And, you know, they just want you to log into the bank. They sent you a code, right? Or, you know, there's a million different scams out there, which are going to be proliferated by AI. And unless you have some sort of proof of personhood, it's really going to wreck a large portion of like the economy.
Yeah, but I think that I see it from the other angle of like, if we volunteer this kind of information, and we don't.
Would you rather have it? Would you rather have it as in a centralized solution of, oh, hey, I go down and get my ID, and then this ID is tracked across like all my email communications and my phone conversations, or would you rather have a decentralized solution where you're just getting a ZK proof that you can use to prove that you're real or not?
Well, ideally, I'd prefer the latter, but I don't think that you know, it's really like the current solution that's being offered. You know what I mean?
But I think it is, and well, even if it's not perfect, they're making steps to getting towards being fully decentralized, and I think that's what matters at the end of the day. Because if they do work towards that end goal, and everything like the hardware and the system all becomes transparent and open source, then I think that's a viable solution.
Yeah, I can understand that perspective. Yet, to be honest, I think me and I think many other people as well, we're not going to volunteer this kind of information, like on any circumstance, not until the point we actually have to.
Exactly.
And I agree about the fact that the proof of personhood, the proof of humanity, it's a big deal, and it's going to be a part of our lives because, like you say, the industry is going on that direction. Just like for example, today we have biometric passports and all kinds of stuff that we didn't have like a decade or two ago. But like, it's too mixed up at the moment to really tell like whether something is beneficial or not. And I think like a lot of conservative types, like myself probably, will just try to avoid this kind of stuff as much as we possibly can, hoping that there will be like less intrusive proof of personality, proof of humanity solutions. For example, social solutions of some kind. Like if 100 people say it's actually you, maybe it's probably you. I'm just throwing something to the air. Like I'm not really saying that I know how to do something like that. I'm just saying that right now, when I hear about a company called Worldcoin and I don't really know much about it, and they want such personal data, like I'm not really willing to consider it. And I'm sure that for many others, they are. For example, you know, like you say, $25 or $75. For some people, it may seem like nothing, but in some parts of the world, this is a fortune. Like if you're in certain places in Africa or the East, and you all of a sudden got $75 because you've like scanned your retina, this can be years of income for some people. So it's definitely not one size fits all, and I can definitely understand those who do choose to do that kind of stuff or don't really care or believe that the government has this kind of information anyway, so who cares, and these guys are working with the government. But like for me personally, I'm very old-fashioned, I guess, about this kind of stuff.
Well, we'll see how it plays out over the next several years. Let's move on to some DeFi news. Gearbox has seen the brilliance of trading bots, and they've added a trustless system to their what are they called? Oh yeah, to their trading platform to allow you to implement trading bot-like functionality using Gelato. It's a pretty cool system. You'll be able to add in trustless trading bot features, all without having to give up your private keys to Telegram, which I think people has been the main criticism of these Telegram bots, is like, where are all those private keys stored and what's the safety and security behind it?
So where did you say they store it?
The Gearbox?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, Gearbox is you manage everything from your own private keys. You don't give anything away. I'm talking about like Unibot, right? And all the other Telegram bots where like you create a private key, or they give you a private key, and then you just like trade through their system.
Seems interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why Unibot's gone from like 0 to 100 million in just a few months. So
Yeah, cool, because it gives such a. We talked about it last week. People want to use the stuff they actually want to use. Like they don't want to be educated on how to use all kinds of stuff. Like people want simple solution, and oftentimes they really are willing to settle for other stuff just in order to have like a simpler solution. And I think this is a very important trend. And I think Gearbox is doing a smart thing, that they do some kind of their own interpretation to this trend.
Mm-hmm. So we also had a postmortem published by Conic, who was unfortunately hacked on Friday last week. They found that the exploit was a read-only reentrancy vulnerability. And then additionally, they also found that there were some wrong assumptions about what address was being returned by the Curve meta registry for ETH, the underlying Curve v2 pool that they were using. And so additionally, there was the CRV USD Omnipool exploit that happened as well too. And this was a variant of a sandwich attack that was targeting our pools. And so the Conic team has hopefully found all the bugs within their contracts and should be going live again soon.
I think they were pretty lucky to not have a huge exploit in DeFi terms, because I really think that if people had taken a much larger capital, this would have been a whole other story. But I think that the second exploit was caught very quick, so it's only like a few $100,000.
Well, it was so the first ETH Omnipool exploit resulted in 3.2 million worth of WETH being stolen from the Omnipool contract, and then the second the second exploit was able to give the attacker a profit of $300,000. Thankfully, in the second exploit, there was a generalized MEV watcher who was there to like front run those transactions, and was able to save a good amount of assets that were there. This was the Curve Monitor backup Telegram bot.
This could have been a much bigger deal if after the first one, which don't get me wrong, it's not good at all that people were able to hack into the ETH Omnipool, and I don't think it's a good it's very good for Conic. On the contrary, yet I do think that I'm not sure that the community will not forgive them, something like that. I think if the CRV USD pool would have been drained, like with the significant capital that is there, wow, that would have been a completely different story. So I'm kind of happy that they were able to at least detect that quick enough to stop the deposits and only allow withdrawals, and talk to the Curve team. And I definitely hope that they figure this out and this will not return again, because I think Conic kind of has a very interesting role in this new omni-chain DeFi dynamics, and I definitely want to see them prosper. Although, like I usually say here, like for me, this whole interoperability stuff, like with the omni-chain and like also, I'm also a bit too conservative for that stuff at the moment as well. Like for me personally, be on mainnet, that's the best. Be on Arbitrum, I still kind of like it, and I like the low fees. But we should just be very, very aware and remember that we are a very young industry with huge risks. Like this is not a joke. This is actual. So like, if you like manage your capital wisely and know that this stuff happens, even with projects that don't try to like. I have no suspicions that Conic is a malicious actor in any way.
Nobody was saying that. I think
No, I'm definitely not referring to the fact that you were saying it, but I'm saying that with other exploits, I sometimes get the feeling that something is not kosher, like we say. With here, I know it's all kosher, but stuff still happens, and we should be very much aware, even when the smartest people build the most amazing platforms.
Yeah. So in other news, we had a thread by Spreakway, by Spreak, who came in and talked about what's happening at Party Parrot, and Parrot is trying to liquidate $72 million of their ICO funds, and give $12 million to the token holders and give $60 million to the team. And they're also unlocking their vesting tokens to allow them to vote on what's happened. I think that may be a little bit off by further in the tweet. I mean, this is like another one of those, what you should not do is have these huge treasuries, like $70 million. It's a lot. It's so much, especially for projects that don't work out. So he says that a key factual, what the Parrot team actually said, that there was, the team had 5.4 billion and appropriated another 6.4 billion Y Parrot from the treasury. They said they don't touch it. And so their claim is inflated by about 2x. Really unfortunate. This is similar to the Hector DAO stuff that's going on as well too.
This is, and again, I don't really know the DAO itself, so I don't want to talk specifically about that. But when a DAO has a very huge, like a very large treasury, because it started on the previous bull market, and then after a while you see that most of what a DAO does is simply like paying its own builders like big paychecks and not really delivering stuff, but still just like maintaining this capital and not dissolving the project and actually giving the money back to the investors, but just like in a way slow rugging it. What can I say? Yeah. This is something that this is a bigger risk to our industry even than the hacks at the moment.
Yeah. So we also had $23 million that was drained from a hot wallet of payment processor AlphaPo. We have another great story about Gains Network on the timeline about how they're changing their tokenomics for the next quarter. What else do we have over the weekend? It looks like the SEC is going to appeal the Ripple case. We'll have to get Alex back on to talk about that. And Celsius has settled its legal disputes, and so customer funds should be coming back from that soon. This week we should get Garrett back at some point. Garrett was Garrett was in France. He will come back. We posted a link to Garrett's talk that he gave at Stable Summit that was called Risk Factors in Stablecoin Design. You can watch that on on his channel, and we've got a link for it on Leviathan News. So that's going to wrap everything up for today. Cyrille, I want to thank you coming back on and being here to talk about Swaap.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you, DeFi Advisor, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys. Goodbye.